Do you plan trips around where the nearest chair is, sit down carefully like something might give out, and tell yourself that's just what 70 looks like? For 14 years, that was my life. I'm 83 now. I still get my exam every year without dreading it, and most days I honestly forget my prostate is part of the conversation at all. Here's something most men never get told plainly. A large share of men past 50 carry some degree of an enlarged prostate. It's one of the most common conditions in aging men, full stop, not a personal failure. What finally eased the pressure for me wasn't a prescription. It was 5 ordinary fruits sitting in produce aisles everywhere, and by the end of this, I'll have walked you through all 5, plainly, one at a time. Here's where I actually lived, for years. Sitting through a movie meant shifting 3 times because something down there felt swollen, tender, like I was sitting on a bruise that never healed. Long car rides became a math problem. How many exits before the next rest stop? How many hours could I really go? I stopped taking the aisle seat at church because getting up twice during the sermon felt like a spectacle. My son asked me once why I always picked the hard kitchen chair over the recliner, and I told him it was better for my back. It wasn't. The recliner put pressure exactly where it already hurt. Nobody sat me down and explained any of this. I went in complaining about the pressure. The doctor pressed on my lower belly, said, "It's your prostate, it's enlarged, that's common at your age," and sent me out with a pamphlet and a prescription in under 10 minutes. I left with more questions than I walked in with. Why does it feel like pressure and not pain? Why worse some days than others? Why does sitting make it louder instead of quieter? Nobody had the time to actually answer that. That's not cruelty, that's just how a rushed system moves a patient through. One appointment stacked on the next, a pamphlet doing the job a real conversation should have done. An old friend of mine, a urologist who'd since retired, finally sat with me one Sunday afternoon over coffee and explained what nobody in an exam room ever had. He told me the gland grows in almost every man as he ages. It's not disease in the way we fear that word. It's tissue responding to decades of hormone signaling, the same way hair changes or joints stiffen. He said the mistake most men make is treating the pressure like a mystery to be endured, instead of a specific, physical thing to be worked on. That conversation did more for me than the 10-minute visit ever had, and it's the reason I went looking for real answers instead of just living with it. So I went and found the answers on my own, and what I found actually made sense of years of discomfort. The prostate sits low in the pelvis, wrapped around the tube that carries urine, tucked right up against the same nerves and tissue that register pressure when you sit. When it swells, which is what enlarged simply means, it doesn't just affect the bathroom. It presses outward into that same crowded, sensitive space, the way a sponge swells inside a narrow hallway and starts brushing both walls at once. Research has documented that this swelling is driven largely by inflammation and a hormonal shift that happens naturally with age, not by anything a man did wrong, and not something rare or shameful. Once I understood it that way, sitting stopped feeling like a mystery injury and started feeling like a specific, physical, explainable kind of crowding. That distinction mattered more to me than I expected. You can't fix what you think is unexplainable. You can absolutely work on crowding and inflammation. So then the real question becomes, what actually eases that pressure safely without pretending to be some miracle cure? Before I get to the 5, I want to tell you about the prescription, because nobody warns you about this part ahead of time. Mine was meant to relax the muscle tissue around the gland so the pressure would ease and urine would flow easier. It helped, some, but the pamphlet listed, in small print, exactly the things men my age already worry about most: lightheadedness on standing, and, for a portion of men, changes in sexual function. I'm not telling you to stop your prescription. Please don't. That's a conversation for you and your doctor, not for me. I'm telling you why I went looking for something to run alongside it, something that worked with the swelling itself instead of just relaxing muscle around it. Fruit number 1 is the pumpkin seed, technically a seed from a fruit, and the one with the deepest research behind it. Researchers who study men with an enlarged prostate have given them a concentrated pumpkin seed extract daily for 3 months and documented meaningful drops in overall symptom severity, including that sense of pelvic pressure. A separate, larger trial that ran a full year found something more nuanced. The main symptom score didn't beat a placebo by much, but the men taking pumpkin seed showed a real, measurable drop in residual pressure and swelling markers, which tells you the mechanism is doing something even when the headline number is mixed. I'll be honest with you about that mixed result, because I'd rather tell you the truth than oversell you a fruit. And in a more direct comparison, researchers pitted pumpkin seed oil against a standard prescription used for easing flow and pressure. The pumpkin oil performed comparably well, with far fewer of the side effects men dread. The mechanism: compounds in the seed calm local inflammation and interact gently with the same hormone pathway driving the swelling, without the system-wide effect a prescription carries. Fruit number 2 is cranberry, and not for the reason you'd guess. Most men think cranberry is only for urinary infections, but a study out of men specifically dealing with lower urinary tract symptoms found that a daily cranberry supplement led to significantly fewer symptoms and a real improvement in quality of life compared to placebo. The mechanism is about reducing irritation and inflammation along that same crowded pelvic tissue, easing the pressure response, not flushing bacteria. Fruit number 3, and this one surprised me, pomegranate. Early laboratory research using an animal model of prostate enlargement found that pomegranate's plant compounds measurably reduced the markers of glandular swelling compared to untreated animals. I want to be honest that this is early-stage research, not a large human trial yet, but the mechanism lines up with everything else here. Pomegranate is rich in polyphenols with a documented anti-inflammatory signature, and inflammation is the common thread running through this entire pressure problem. Fruit number 4 is the blueberry. Blueberries carry a dense concentration of anthocyanins, the same pigment compounds that give them their color, and researchers studying inflammation in human tissue have documented that these compounds calm inflammatory signaling directly at the cellular level. Applied to a pelvis already swollen and irritated, that's exactly the kind of quiet, background support that adds up over weeks, not overnight. And fruit number 5 is the orange, or really, the vitamin C inside it. A large study following tens of thousands of men over years found that those with higher vitamin C intake from food were meaningfully less likely to have symptoms consistent with an enlarged prostate, compared to men with lower intake. Interestingly, that same study found whole fruit alone wasn't the strongest factor. It was specifically the vitamin C and the vegetables carrying it that mattered most. So don't just eat an orange and call it done. Pair it with real vegetables, and you're working with what the actual data shows, not a shortcut version of it. Here's the honest picture, because I don't want you thinking one bowl of fruit undoes 14 years of pressure. What actually worked for me was treating these 5 like a small system, not 5 separate miracle cures competing with each other. Pumpkin seeds, a handful, most days, usually with breakfast. Cranberry, unsweetened, a few times a week, sometimes as a small glass of the unsweetened juice, sometimes the dried version tossed over oatmeal. A small serving of pomegranate arils tossed into breakfast or a salad. A handful of blueberries, plain, no added sugar. And an orange alongside real vegetables at lunch, not instead of them, because that's what the actual data shows matters. Underneath all 5, I also cut back hard on fried food and heavily processed meat, because researchers tracking metabolic health have connected that kind of heavy diet to worse prostate swelling and worse symptoms in the exact tissue we're talking about. Second, I started walking most evenings after dinner instead of sinking into the recliner. A large, long-running study of health professionals found that men who stayed physically active reported meaningfully less pressure and slower progression of an enlarged prostate than men who stayed sedentary. Third, I paid attention to how much I drank late in the evening, spacing fluids out across the day instead of loading up after dinner, which took some of the nighttime edge off the daytime pressure too. None of it was a pill. None of it was a promise. Just a stacked, ordinary system done consistently, week after week, long enough for it to actually add up. And through every bit of it, I kept my yearly exam. That part is not negotiable, and I want to say it directly. Nothing here replaces your doctor, your exam, or your screening schedule. This is support that lives alongside medical care, never in place of it. These days I can sit through a whole movie without shifting once. Long car rides are just car rides again. I stop when I want to, not when my body forces the issue. And I've stopped picking chairs based on how they'll feel after 20 minutes. I think about a man named Dominic, 71, spent 30 years as a mail carrier outside Tulsa, on his feet and in his truck all day, every day, for decades. He wrote me that the pressure had gotten so constant he'd started dreading his own delivery route, timing streets around which houses had a bathroom he could quietly use, and privately worrying he'd have to retire early because of it. He talked to his doctor first, kept every appointment on schedule, and only then layered in the same 5 fruits alongside cutting the fried food and adding the evening walk. About 2 months in, he told me the pressure had gone from something he thought about hourly to something he barely noticed most days. He wasn't cured. He was comfortable, back on his route without the dread, sitting down at the end of the day without wincing, and he told me the plain, ordinary fruit bowl on his kitchen counter felt like the least dramatic solution he'd ever tried, and the only one that actually stuck. That's the actual goal, not a miracle. Comfort and getting your ordinary day back, one uneventful afternoon at a time. What I want you to walk away with is this. The pressure you've been carrying isn't something you have to just accept as the price of getting older. I think about the man I was, shifting in his seat through his own grandson's school play, doing math about exits instead of watching the stage, missing half of what mattered because his body was busy negotiating with him. And I think about the man I am now, 83, sitting through the whole thing, present, comfortable, not doing math in his head, actually watching his own grandson instead of the exit sign. That's not youth. That's peace with my own body. It's the difference between managing a problem quietly, forever, bracing for it every single time you sit down, and actually being done thinking about it most days. So tell me in the comments, how long have you been quietly adjusting your whole day around this pressure? And has anyone ever actually explained to you why it happens? I read every comment myself. And if this helped you understand your own body a little better today, subscribe, because I've got more of what I've learned to share, and I'd like you to be here for it. Keep getting checked, keep talking to your doctor, and don't let one uncomfortable afternoon convince you this is just how the rest of your life has to feel.